Conversations That Matter is a partner program of the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Finance Minister Dion says that we're in really good shape in British Columbia. Is he right?
Really good shape. It's a relative thing right now, I'd say. BC, if you just want to talk economic growth, we're growing at what I would characterize as slightly below historic averages. But when he says really good shape, he's referring to our relative position in a Canadian context and maybe even a little broader North American context. And in that realm, I would say yes, because we probably will see the fastest economic growth this year and perhaps next year as well, close to Ontario, but we'll be right near the top of the heap of the provincial growth rankings. And we have this relatively diverse and, because of its diversity, resilient economy. So really good is maybe a bit of a stretch, but we're in pretty good shape, I would say.
You know, you bring up an interesting point when you say that we have a diverse economy,
Sure.
Because it wasn't so long ago that we looked at it and went, well, let's see, there's mining, there's lumber, there used to be fishing, tourism, and then, but now we say that we're diverse. Describe what the BC economy looks like.
So yeah, I mean diverse, and particularly again when you look to other provinces, and you only have to look to Alberta and what they're going through to get the sort of opposite of diversity. So yeah, we say it's diverse. From an economist perspective, we like to look at the export sector, because really at the end of the day, exports, we're a small open trading economy, and exports drive wealth and prosperity. They tend to be higher productivity sectors, they tend to pay higher wages, and companies that are in the exporting realm can take advantages of economies of scale by selling into the global marketplace. There's also that discipline of having to be efficient and productive to be able to compete in the global marketplace. So all that adds up to make it a good undertaking for a small open economy. And so our export sector is quite diverse. You correctly identified. We used to be very wood products oriented, pulp and paper and forestry products and mining. We still have those. Those are still important economic engines, but now we've got a host of other export oriented industries. And if you dive down into some of the sectors, you've got non-resource manufacturing, and I think there's a great deal of sort of companies that fly under the radar up the valley way that are engaged in exporting activity, but they tend not to be public companies. A lot of them are privately owned. And then we've got agriculture. Agri-food is doing well. The weak Canadian dollar, and we may come back to that in a moment, but the weak Canadian dollar is helping that sector. And then we've got this host or array of professional services. So you've got things like accounting and engineering services and environmental services and even legal services that are exported and sold into other jurisdictions. Layer on top of that tourism. Economists consider tourism an export industry because it represents a flow inwards of money from outside the province. Then we have the film and television industry, which is booming as well. And then also in that export category, I would put in transportation services, and that's the whole gateway port and airport sector, and that is, of course, Metro Vancouver is big for the gateway, but we also have Prince Rupert. A whole bunch of money over the past decade has been invested by both provincial and federal governments, and there's a lot of activity and growth in that sector as well. So,
when you talk about export, I think that there's two components that come to mind that, and let's talk about one and then the other. First is Port Metro Vancouver and also Prince Rupert. How important is geography in our ability to not only export the products that are being created here, but those of the rest of Western Canada, as far as our overall economy? Like, the port itself is almost an economic engine unto itself.
Absolutely, it is. It is. It really is almost an economic engine, and I think its economic importance is not widely recognized by the general population down in the Lower Mainland in particular, but it really is a massive economic engine, and for a number of reasons. I mean, it generates thousands of jobs in its own right, but it facilitates trade, and that really is key. And it, like you correctly identified, it facilitates trade not just for British Columbia, but for Western Canada and even stretching into the eastern parts of Canada. And it is two-way trade. And I remember back when they were talking about putting a container terminal up in the Port of Prince Rupert, a lot of people were taking a look at that and saying, you know what, that's great. We will import containers and they will go to right into central USA, right to Chicago. And the geography is excellent because it's a day closer than other competing ports in the west coast of the US. And people would say, well, what are we going to ship back? Because at that time, there was nothing to ship back. But over time, with the evolution of the port, we've got two-way flows, lumber. The growth in China has been very, very beneficial. So a lot of those containers are stuffed with lumber and pulp and some other products. So it hasn't been the case that those containers are going back empty. That has also helped with the Port of Prince Rupert and its diversification. And yeah, so it's been a good news story for British Columbia.
So the other component in that whole export market is the value of the Canadian dollar. It's sunk quite a bit over the last year, so much because our dollar is connected to the price of oil.
Yep.
But so the oil industry may be hurting, but is everything else benefiting as a result, and especially here in BC?
Sure, yeah. So BC is one of the provinces, probably along with Ontario, that is a benefactor of the weak Canadian dollar. And that's just because it makes our export products and services more competitively priced, primarily in the US marketplace, but our dollar slipped relative to other currencies around the world as well. And I mean, if you think of what's happened over the past 3 years, the dollar's down 30%. So basically, Canadian goods and services are on sale 30%. And that counts for tourism and film and television as well. So yeah, in that sense, it has definitely been a benefit to British Columbia. If you look at the sort of all-in, kind of consider all factors, a weaker Canadian dollar does benefit BC economically because of the export lift. Now, on the flip side, it hurts consumers, cross-border shoppers, snowbirds, people who like to vacation in the United States, of course, are paying more. But like I said, on a net basis, it's a benefit.
But isn't there an added benefit to a low Canadian dollar if consumers now all of a sudden stop rushing down to the United States? Aren't we then keeping that money at home? And isn't that better for us to spend the money that we make in British Columbia, because it goes back into our economy and contributes to our government revenues as well?
Sure.
Is cross-border shopping like one of those things that you sort of go, don't do it?
Well, it does. It cuts both ways, and it's a great point. So a few years back, we took a look at this very issue, back when the dollar was at parity, and there was you look back 5-6 years, there was a big run-up in the number of same-day border crossings, Canadians going down to the U.S., coming back on the same day. And of course, that's a fairly good proxy for cross-border shopping, because that's what they do when they go down there. They fill it with gas, buy some milk, buy some cheese, maybe some kids' clothes, maybe a set of tires, who knows, and come back into Canada. So we estimated at that time, around 2013, that it was probably shaving maybe a full percentage point off growth in retail spending in BC, because the numbers were so large. Make some assumptions that the average car spends $100 or $150, and it became apparent quite quickly that it was impacting retail spending. It's not all the story, because retail sales in BC were quite weak around 2013, but we concluded that it was definitely a factor. Fast forward a couple of years, the number of people crossing the border for these same-day trips has fallen by 150,000 per month. So you get 150, maybe 160, depending on the month, 170. Fewer people making these same-day trips into the U.S., and we actually see retail sales quite strong. Now, I got to be careful. I'm not saying that's the only factor. There's a lot of other factors in the retail spending, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle, and some of it's gasoline. And then, like you correctly identified, the other leakages not happening. So stores that are clustered along the border in the Langleys and the South Surreys, and maybe even some of Chilliwack, will actually benefit and see improved sales as a result of less leakages to the U.S.
But the provincial government must benefit from that as well.
They will get more retail sales tax, absolutely.
So I've got to get you to hang on for just 1 second while we take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program. Thank you. I remember a couple of years ago there was this push to save the Canadian film industry by putting in incentives. Mm-hmm. The lower Canadian dollar has done more than anything, has it not?
Yeah, it absolutely has, yeah.
And what does the film and television industry represent now as far as the overall economy is concerned? Like it does make a contribution.
It does make a contribution, yeah. I'm not entirely sure of what the share of GDP measure, but there's billions of dollars spent in the local economy on film and television production. There's not much doubt about that. The thing that Vancouver and BC has going for it is it's a well-established industry. People in the sector continually report the high quality of labor, good sites to shoot and film here in BC. So in addition to having the benefit of the weaker dollar, it's already a well-established place for doing film and television productions. Also, we're in the same time zone as LA, and people say that helps out a fair bit. We were losing some Canadian productions apparently to Ontario when they had more generous labor tax credits for production, but I think my understanding is those have been scaled back a little bit, so we're on a more competitive footing vis-a-vis Ontario, and as a result, the film and television industry really is robust. I think it's almost running full out.
Wow. I want to talk about forestry. We've just seen the Canada-U.S. softwood trade agreement expire.
Right.
Without a replacement having been negotiated.
Yeah.
Where is the forest industry at?
Forest industry, it's a complex question. It's a
always has been.
Yeah, it always has been. So we'll park the softwood lumber agreement piece of it to the side for now, and I'll just give you some background on the forest sector in general. So, of course, went through tough times. You had the financial crisis, the U.S. housing market collapsed, and U.S. housing starts plummeted. And that was very difficult for a number of years for BC's forest products industry. Lumber prices were weak. Volume of sales into the U.S. marketplace was quite bad. Along came China. We started to export more wood products to China. And in some senses, the Chinese marketplace actually kind of rescued, or at least saved the forest products industry from a much worse scenario, because we saw double-digit growth, and we actually export, I think it's upwards of $1 billion now, of lumber to China.
Just China specifically?
Yeah, just to China, yeah. Yeah, maybe that number might be a bit high, but it's a meaningful number now. And that helped sort of ease some of the pain from what was happening in the United States. And then we come forward a couple more years and the U.S. housing market recovers, and you see U.S. housing starts climb from down around 450,000 units. Remember, they were running at 2 million prior to the crisis, plummeted to 450,000 housing units, and now we're back up over 1 million, maybe pushing 1.1 million. So that has helped. Lumber
and then
prices,
add in the lower dollar.
And then add in the lower price, and lumber prices were stronger, and then add in the lower dollar. That makes us more competitive. But the U.S. housing market's sort of leveled off a little bit, and lumber prices have weakened. So it's not, over the past 6 or 8 months, so it's not that robust environment that it once was. Still, prospects are reasonably good, because most economists do anticipate that U.S. housing starts will climb back above 1.5 million. At the same time, yeah. So at the same time,
because the U.S. economy looks like it's revving up to like surge ahead at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of indications that the U.S. economy is gaining more and more traction, and it's going to be in good shape for the next couple of years. So if you see U.S. housing starts climb up past 1.5 million, that will create a robust pricing environment, because there's going to be a contraction in supply in other parts of Canada. The big catch, however, in the BC context, and the big O, is because of the pine beetle, the amount of fiber trees available to harvest is going to contract, and it's going to shrink over the next 5 years probably, and that is starting to bite now. If you talk to people in the lumber industry, it's getting more difficult to get fiber, and the price of that's being bid up, which is squeezing margins for companies operating. So the absolute size of BC's lumber industry is going to shrink over the next 5 years because of the reduction in fiber supply. So you may have this good pricing environment.
And great demand.
But you're not going to have the fiber to create the lumber and export.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's like I said, it's a mixed story.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to come back a couple of years and take a look at what has transpired and where we're at in forestry. Because forestry, you take a look at the dominant role that it played in the BC economy historically over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
To see it now play, it's not a footnote yet, but it's no longer the dominant force that it was.
Yeah, I have an economist friend who was in the business for many years, and she used to say she used to be able to forecast BC's economy just by forecasting U.S. housing starts.
Yeah.
So where U.S. housing starts, the BC economy, that's three or four decades ago.
Yeah.
Things are very different. Again, of course, we talked about diversity, but the footprint of the forest product sector is not nearly as big as it once was, but it still is probably the largest economic engine in the province.
Once again, we got to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program. Thank you.
So let's take a look at mining. And whenever I think of mining, I think about the fact that we live in a highly technical, interconnected digital world, and people go, oh yeah, that's the future. But I don't think that you can live that future without the natural resources that are required to build those products.
Of course not. Yeah.
Are we in a good position from a mining perspective in BC?
I would say we're in a challenging position from a mining perspective in BC.
Is that because of low commodity prices, low demand, or a number of other constraints that make it difficult to bring mines to production?
It's both of those. So
Yeah.
we're
And more.
And yeah, both of those and more. We're currently in this low commodity world, low commodity price world.
Because China's softened.
China's slowed.
Yeah.
It's gone from 10% growth a year for 30 decades of 10% plus growth.
Yeah.
Now official numbers say it's maybe 7.5%. A lot of pundits who watch more closely say it might be 3.5%, 4%.
Yeah. So I know that we've got the promise of LNG out there. It's not realized yet. There's some development money that's going into that sector. But energy did play a pretty important role at one point a few years ago before the price of natural gas dropped. Where are we at as far as the energy sector is concerned?
Energy sector in BC, again, another one of those. It was great. There was a time there where the provincial government was getting a couple $2 billion in royalties and other fees from the natural gas industry. And now they get maybe a couple hundred. It fell to 400, maybe it's 200 million now. So a big change in terms of the revenue flowing to the crown from that industry.
Yeah. So, okay, forestry, mining, fishing, not as robust as they were before, and yet we're doing well. What else is starting to fill in the gap?
Yeah, it's good. It's not just tourism and fishing. So, agriculture, still a relatively small piece of the economy and the export picture overall, but it has grown and continues to grow quite strongly. Then there's non-resource related manufacturing activity. So we actually do have a fair amount of high-tech manufacturing. And then the high-tech industry more generally, which includes the internet and the services and all that. That is now estimated to be between 6 and 7% of all economic activity in the province. So that's a sizable piece of what's filling the gap.
So what about educational facilities? SFU President Andrew Petter says you put in a university and you build the network around that. It contributes up to $5 billion worth of, GDP to a region or to the province. How important is the fact that we've got this unique post-secondary educational structure in British Columbia that has all these different schools who aren't competing with one another, but they're attracting money in from outside of the province,
sure.
and then they're building a knowledge base
for research. Absolutely,
Yeah.
They're key. They are key. I mean, economists spend a lot of time looking at what are kind of the underlying factors that help economies grow, what improves productivity over time, and more it's human capital's right at the top of the list. Having good quality infrastructure is also very important. But by human capital, I just mean exactly what you're talking about, the skills and the knowledge base that in a large part does emanate from universities, and having world-class universities is important to that. And it does help attract research, and I think you were alluding to some of the research dollars that flow into the province. Big benefit.
This is our final break. We'll be right back in a moment.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading a fascinating article that said the only way that you grow an economy is through ideas. It starts here.
Yeah.
Everything that's in this room, everything that we do is a manifestation of an idea. The more intelligence you have, the more ideas you create, the more robust the economy is that you have, because you take it from idea and transform it into a physical state. You're creating economic activity.
Right, and that process is very difficult to quantify, but essentially you're going from idea to innovation to creating something new and then taking it to the marketplace. And no, absolutely, that is where you do, at the end of the day, get growth and productivity, because, I mean, if you kept doing everything that we've done in the past in the same way, or didn't develop new products and new ideas, and then we would pretty much be where we were at the past, right?
So are we devoting enough energy and money into R&D then here in BC?
Yeah, and Canada and BC, we tend to underinvest relative to other jurisdictions in R&D. We could do more. There's some credits and incentives from the federal government for companies to invest. You know, not clear if it's maybe not the best way to do it, how we do it in Canada, but there's no doubt if you can encourage more R&D, particularly in new industries and sectors that are going to see new ideas come to fruition and come to the marketplace, big lift, big benefit. And that is, like you said, at the end of the day, that's where you're going to get your growth, but more importantly, that's where you're going to get your productivity gains.
Okay, to wrap up, report card time.
Okay.
What grade do you give the BC economy, and where can we improve?
Okay, so what grade? So do I get to hide behind the relative performance? I'd give the BC economy, because of the global challenges, I mean, it's a pretty soft global economic backdrop right now,
Yeah.
and we are an export-dependent economy. So I'd give us a B+.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and that's how well we're doing relative to other jurisdictions. There's lots of areas for improvement, and I guess now you're going to ask me to identify some of those.
Just the top two.
Top two. Well, big one for the business community is addressing the setback of going back to the PST.
It's cost a lot of money.
It's cost a lot of money. So $1.5 billion in costs layered back onto businesses. But the big thing is the fact that now a lot of what companies invest in terms of their capital equipment, which again helps drive productivity, is taxed back at the 7% rate. Under the HST system, you get the tax credits and you don't effectively...
It becomes flow through,
and you're not paying tax when you buy machinery and equipment. Now in British Columbia, machinery and equipment is exempt from the tax for manufacturers and people operating in the forest products and resource sector, but as we just discussed, there's other areas that are now more important, becoming almost equally important. And all those industries pay tax on all the equipment and inputs into their business operations. So if we could find a way to undo that tax burden or reduce that tax burden, that would help drive business investment. And business investment has been weak in the BC for a number of years. And I'm going to give you two more rather than just one. Continue to invest in infrastructure. We have invested a lot. That doesn't mean don't continue to pay attention to it, because we need to be competitive vis-a-vis other ports down the west coast of North America. It's very important that we're competitive and can get containers and ship products through the port in a timely manner. And then the human capital piece, getting the human capital piece right. Then we also have to look at, do we have the right mix between a university track and, say, a skilled trades track? It's more of the BCIT.
Well, I hope you come back next year and we can do it again. Thank you very much. Appreciate you doing this.
You bet.
Yeah.